What's happening, everyone? Hey, this is another episode of the Adventure Box podcast put on by Historical Conquest. This is a great adventure as we go through American history. Not just American history, we're also going to break off into doing ancient civilizations as well this semester. As you might remember, Monday and Wednesdays next month will be American history, and Tuesdays and Thursdays will be ancient civilizations. We actually broke it up because we're doing both curriculums at the same time, and we have one podcast, so we want to share it with everyone. We will make sure that everyone remembers the difference between American history and the ancient civilizations. Two different courses. This way you don't have to listen to it every day, but if you want to, please do. Okay, so this is something really interesting. Last time, or in the times previous, we've been talking about fact being 100%, everyone sees it the same way every time, and theory, which is we make a lot of assumptions over the possibility of something being true. Now, in history, we have to do this because, like in ancient history, we weren't there. We weren't there, and so we can't tell you exactly what happened, but we can give you the best assumptions based on historical and archaeological findings. So by doing this, we're able to give you the best possible understanding of history and how it was. Now, Native American being all Native American, North, Central, Mesoamerica, there's a lot of assumptions that are made in there. And we're going to go through all of the different assumptions and theories and also what is fact. But what's most important is to understand this for what we're studying right now. We're studying the North America. Wow, okay, I gotta get myself back together. The North America tribes and cultures. Okay, so as we spoke about previously, they say that the people came from Russia into Alaska via a land bridge. Well, as you know, there are two large lakes in this, two deep pockets, and they're huge. They're like city size, or sorry, not city size, state size. So the state of Rhode Island would actually fit in this big hole that's right here, right in the middle of the Bering Straits. And then there's another one just above it. But they could have gone around in order to follow the mammoths and other herds like the bison into Alaska from Siberia. So as they come in, there's a division. Some of them were the Arctic culture, and they stayed up north. These are ones that hunted whales all the time and seals and lived in the Arctic ice most of the year. Now, there was actually days when it would melt off. There was a summer, but not much of it, especially during the end of the Ice Age. So because the Ice Age the ice was so thick up in this area, some of it wouldn't melt, but a lot of it would, and that's where they would live as much as possible. Again, go back to yesterday's episode and you'll be able to read all about it. But there was a division. Some went north and some went south. Some traveled south on the coast and then started to settle. Now, the northern coast culture, not tribe, northern coast culture was actually a collection of different tribes, but they call it the northern coast culture. I'm going to say that as many times as possible so you remember it. Was basically saying that they are in the north and they're on the coast. What makes this distinguished is they are not in the Arctic, and they are not mixed with the other groups that are down below. And most likely this came from families that came down the coast through Alaska, down into Canada, and into what is now known as the United States. Now, as they were traveling down, groups would break off. And okay, so I'm going to show you a picture. This is talking about one of the falsehoods that is out there. This is a picture. If you can see it on YouTube, you can actually see a picture of, right here is the Tlingit tribe. Think of Alaska. If you're listening to this on the podcast, think of Alaska, and it has a panhandle coming out to the east. That panhandle is southeast Alaska. That's where I used to live. Now, the Tlingit tribe, that's not their area. And the reason why that has to be distinguished is they are very proud of their culture and are very different than the other cultures there. So I'm going to show you another picture that also has some falsehoods in it, but it is essential to be able to see. And this is probably the best picture I had with some of these tribes, though it's also not completely true. Okay, so you have the Tlingit up in northern Southeast Alaska. And then it says you have the, let's see, it's the Tsimshian. The Tsimshian is a tribe, and that's the one I was trying to remember how to say it exactly. They are south of the Tlingit tribe, but it puts the Haida out here on an island. Well, if you know anything about the Haida was actually mixed in here as well. So there's actually spots. Now, interesting enough, when tribes take over a land, most of them are nomadic. The northern coastal tribes, the culture, were nomadic, but they also stayed in very set places. Why? It's because they actually built civilizations. Now, this is nearing the Neolithic era. And we talked about that last time. Neolithic, again, I'm throwing out all these big words at you, or words that you've probably never heard of before, but they're very important. Neolithic is basically when people stopped becoming wanderers and started setting up civilizations of their own. So, though the coastal tribes came down around 10,000 BC, the Tlingits weren't actually established until about 5,000, even maybe going back to 7,000 BC. But that's the soonest, that's the earliest that they claim that they were actually a tribe. Again, going into the Neolithic era, which is when the tribes and the set civilizations were created. So the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Tsimshian were actually establishing their own civilizations. And so those stuck around. Those that didn't want to be part of those tribes or broke off, so there were intermingling between tribes, which wasn't highly looked upon by some people, including the elders. And so they would break off and create their own cultures, their own tribes. And they would usually go down lower. So you have the Bella Coola. So this is more of the Canadian area. Let me bring up, nope, don't want to go there yet. Okay, and I don't want to go there. Let me go to the map. The map's probably the best way of showing you this. Okay, again, Alaska, coming here. You have Juneau, which is where the Tlingit was. So you have Prince Wales Island, which was the Haida. But the Haida was also mixed into some of these other areas. You also have the Tsimshian, which was in this area of Wrangell. And down in Ketchikan, it's interesting because that was also a mixture of Tlingit. Now, the reason why there's some mixture as well is, again, I talked about they intermingled between the tribes. There were, the tribes were very intelligent at this time. So a lot of people want to say things like they were very primitive and such. They were actually very intelligent. They knew that there was reasons why you did not interbreed within the same culture all the time because of things that happen to a human body when there's intermixing of families within that. So they would actually work with these other tribes, creating a very dynamic and diverse group inside of their own people. But as you go down lower, you get into these other tribes. Now, there's another one that our curriculum focuses on. They focus mostly on the Tlingit, the Haida, and also the Coastal Salish. So the Coastal Salish actually stayed in, so there you go, Bella Coola is right there. But you mostly stayed in this area. And the reason why they stayed in this area is because they lived on the coast. They were very coastal people. All these people. They didn't go very far inland. So if they went inland, it was basically where there were streams and rivers, so they could still harvest the maritime goods, resources, the otters, seals, whales, anything the fish. All these tribes were very highly dependent on the fishing, and also other large game. Again, they would hunt bear, moose, and such. And so as you go into this area, you're going to see a lot of they're called the Coast Salish, but they're actually broken up to many different groups as well. Okay, so going back to the Tlingit. So let's go on to the next picture. There we go. It finally worked. So this picture, for some reason, was giving me trouble. I can't zoom in, I can't zoom out, and sometimes it only show me like that quarter, a small quarter of the building. This is the Huna Tlingit clan house. Again, I say Tlingit being very broad because there's different groups that would come in. So this is the kind of art that you would see. You'd have totem poles. You'd have art on the side of buildings. Yes, these kind of buildings were built earlier than 1800s. They were actually creating these clan houses out of wood, stick framing. A lot of things that we were doing these days, they were actually thousands of years ago. And so this is something really important to know because a lot of times we want to say, oh, these people were primitive. Actually, they weren't. They were very highly evolved for their area. They were very adaptive to their area. And so in the movement of these cultures, they would set up governments, economies, trade, all these things. Everything we see in ancient civilizations in Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, and we say, oh, they were so smart. The Tlingits, the Haida, the Arctic tribes, they all adapted to the areas and became very intelligent on what, if you wanted to know anything, say back in the 1900s, if you wanted to know anything about the area, if scientists went back in time, the Tlingit could tell you what was going on at each time. They were so specific to understanding their environment. Did they care about what was happening halfway across the world? No, they had no concern whatsoever because that was not based on their survival, which is a lot of times why we talk about tribes and groups being very primitive. But knowing what they built, how they organized their civilization, the roles that they played, all these things, it makes it so essential when it comes to understanding one, Alaska and the Native American tribes up there, but also how that trickled down into North America in what we call now the United States. Okay, so you're going to read a lot about this in the curriculum. Again, this is the curriculum that you can buy on Amazon. You can get it in our Venture Box. You can also get expansion packs based on this one topic for the month. Now, in here, you're going to get a lot of different things. There's a lot of information that's built in here. Here we go. There we go. Okay. In this, you have everything from the origins of the people, the culture of the people, the Native American tribes and such. Or, sorry, I should say the tribes and the cultures. But just know, when we're talking about the cultures, we're not talking about the tribes. They're very different. Arctic is not a tribe. The Arctic coast culture. It's built above a lot of different tribes. The North Coast culture is built above a lot of different tribes. And the real reason that why they're distinguished is because they started off together and they broke off into their different tribes. They attacked each other for different land, all these different things. They were not always the most cooperative with other tribes. And when somebody tried to come in that was brand new, you'd have what were they called? Confederacies of these different tribes. These groups of tribes coming together to fight off newcomers. So one thing that's really interesting to learn about, again, you wouldn't hear this from a history book, but let's go back up to Juneau. So Juneau is right here. This is Juneau. This is Douglas. Our high school was like right here, right next to the bridge between Douglas and Juneau. The land would actually stretch out here. The road would come out here and would come out as far as here. It's completely landlocked. Now, the Tlingit had many different villages controlled by chieftains or chiefs that would be in all these different tribes that were speckled throughout this area. But here's one thing that you need to know. What is this area? This area is completely glaciers. This is actually a glacier. Let's zoom out. This whole area on the east side of Southeast Alaska is completely glaciers. There is so many glaciers, and there's actually more glaciers. It's actually up here that there's glaciers, and the glaciers actually come into here, but the map's just showing you land inside the United States. What makes this significant is this ice field. Here you go, right there. The Atlin Province Park. Okay, that's just the park. That's not the. Oh, I'm trying to remember what the actual area is called. But this ice field is bigger than the state of Rhode Island and also some of the other smaller states. And it is growing and shrinking in different areas. So down here, if you come down into this channel over here, the Taku River, there is a glacier that grows and shrinks every year. It grows during the winter and it shrinks during the summer. And then it grows even further during the winter and shrinks a little bit more. And what's happening? The ice is actually moving. Yes, even though you think that glaciers are attached to a piece of land, they actually move. So some of these glaciers are shrinking, adding to this ice field, and then it's moving down south. Wow, you wouldn't think that ice could actually move, but it's true. Ice, most of the glaciers stay solid. Let me just preface that. But glaciers do move. And so the Tlingit and Haida, Tlingit here, Prince William Island, more where the Haida were and speckled into this area. But this is something that's really important to know for this reason. The coastal culture could not go east over the glaciers, over the ice fields. We, this day, cannot build roads through that ice field. We actually have this plan, or sorry, Juneau has this plan. They've never done it, to actually build a road coming up here, up to Haines. And then from Haines, there's actually a road that comes out. There's actually a highway that goes out. And Skagway, they have another highway that goes out. But we're not attached to that in Juneau, or we were not attached to that, as I did move. But we are very isolated in this area. The only way to come in here is by boat and by plane. The Tlingits had these amazing open water vessels. So they would actually have these, think of it as canoes, but huge. 2 people side by side rowing, 60 feet long. These were how big the ships were. There's some great images online, and they still make these ships now, though they're more for ceremonies and such. Because right now everyone has boats. I mean, you live in Southeast Alaska, you got a boat, or not, but most people, or a lot of people, have boats down there. Okay, so coming down further, let's go into some of the pictures. Let's bring back the pictures that I had. And I know if you're on YouTube, you're not going to be able to, or if you're not on YouTube, you're not going to see this. But this is a very important image here. So if you look at what they were wearing when they're hunting, what are these? They're not fur. That's skin. That's seal skin stretched and sewn together because they are waterproof. If somebody gets splashed on, it's like a rain jacket. You don't have to worry about it. This water was frigid cold. You jump in, you're most likely to die. These people had waterproof and also fur inside to keep them warm during this time. And they would hunt seals and whales and everything else. So this is an essential understanding that even down in Southeast Alaska, they still hunted seals and whales. And they used the seal skin, much like, remember what we learned yesterday, the Arctic tribe used to stretch the seal skin and also walrus skin to create their boats because they were waterproof, watertight. Okay, so moving on. Okay, we already went over this, and this image is really small, but I'll try to blow it up. Seattle's down here, Vancouver Island's down here. This was the Coastal Salish. Now, the Coastal Salish was actually built of a few different tribes, but mostly stayed within their own quote-unquote tribe. And that was in the United States and Canada. See, interesting enough, I mean, everyone should know this, but you don't really think about it sometimes. There were no states back then. There were no countries back then. There was land, and there was tribal territories. You did not cross into a tribal territory because you might be attacked, much like when the Russians try to come in, and the Tlingit, the Haida, all of the northern coast culture would attack them. And so that's something really important to know. And one more thing, Coastal Salish, this is an image of their tribe. Now again, this is back when they're pictures, so they have evolved a lot between the 5000 BC and present day, or at least present day when they took this picture. So I think that's of all my pictures. Now, so let's go through just a few more things. I've got to end this. But one thing to know in this curriculum, you're going to be able to go back and see during this time, during the time that they were in the Neolithic era, again, making their tribes, making permanent establishments, making settlements in the land. This is what was happening around the world. Ancient Egypt was going through their early Neolithic communities. So, same time, way different places. These all basically happened near the same area. Mesopotamia was doing the same thing. You think of Mesopotamia, you think of one of the earliest civilizations that was built right there with Egypt. These were Neolithic communities. You have China and India, or at least the Indus Valley. These ones were being established around 4000 BC. Egypt and Mesopotamia around 5000 BC. 3000 BC, you have ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia solidifying their civilization. Again, I said it was early in the 5000 BC. And you go through all these things. You're also going to learn about certain people, but there's in the curriculum we talk about some of the main chieftains, the ones that were the most influential. Sadly, we do not have ones from ancient times. We just have modern day chieftains that we have in this curriculum. The reason is because until the late 1800s, and actually, no, not even the late 1800s, the mid to late 1800s, sorry, 18th century, that's what it was. So early, late 1800s, early 1900s is when they finally started writing down the history of the northern coastal culture. Again, the northern coastal culture was actually all oral history. They spread it down whenever they did the ceremonies. They would talk about their culture. They would talk about their myths and their religion. Yes, I do separate the two, right? Because I never want to demean someone's religion, because some of them still believe in the ancient religions. And the myths being that even they say that they are not quite sure what happened, but this is the story that has been passed down for thousands of years, as they would say it. One of the great things that I found out from being there in Southeast Alaska with the Tlingit tribe, and I worked very closely with the Tlingit tribe, with the Tongan people that were there. Yeah, Tongan people from way, way, way down here. Okay, there's Tonga. There's New Zealand. There's Australia. There's Samoa. Oh, that's Samoa. Tonga, right there. And there's Australia, New Zealand. Okay, you see how far that is? There is actually Tongan similar cultures between the Tlingits and the Tongans. Yes, that is true. There was actually a culture center that was built in Juneau. I don't know if it lasted, but there's a lot of research that melded the two cultures and said, hey, these are what we are, what our cultures are. And the other group said, here's what our cultures are. And they found great similarities. Then they found the possibility of tribes traveling from North America down to Tonga and vice versa, and sharing agriculture. Because, interesting enough, in the Americas, there were sweet potatoes. Tonga, there shouldn't have been sweet potatoes, but there are. And they plant them, and they grow them there. Isn't that great? So there are things where there are, again, theories based on the Native American beliefs and the Tongan beliefs. So I'm not going to say that they're wrong. And also some archaeologists love to talk about the shipping lanes, the trade lanes that could have been established between North America and places on the coasts in Asia and the Australian area and the South Pacific. So these are very interesting to understand. We don't talk about it much in the culture. I'm just letting you know as my experience being down in Southeast Alaska. So again, we're going to talk to you about chieftains, but they're not ancient, because most of the history was not written down until, again, the late 1800s, the late 1800s, early 1900s. Okay. In here, we'll also talk about, again, life lessons that you need to learn. We're going to talk about how they actually did have slaves back then. So really interesting. The coastal cultures actually enslaved individuals that they took in attacks on other tribes. So when they attacked another tribe, they would take slaves and use them in their culture. Now, they were treated differently than those that you would see in the plantations, but they were very much slaves and controlled by the tribe. So it's very interesting. Native Americans did have slavery, just like every culture in the world had some form of slavery at some point. Some would consider it like the feudal system, basically slavery. The serfs were nearly slaves, but they quote unquote owned their land, even though they were forced to farm it and forced to pay a tax. And so you're going to go over a little bit of that. The archaeological findings, you're going to find some of that. Life lessons is what I wanted to tell you about. Okay, so one of the great things to learn about this, and it is all about in this culture, is the community. Again, this is the Neolithic area the era when they started coming together. This is actually when the culture started to grow and become more than what it was before. And this is where we can actually learn about the culture. I was telling you about it yesterday. So when you go hunt a whale, you don't go as an individual. You don't go as a family. You go out as a community. And you bring in 1, 2, or more whales. And you harvest them as a community. These tribes, if you can learn anything from the Native Americans, learn about their community and their societal structure, social structure. It will tell you a lot of things about how community was so important to these people because they were set for their survival, and no one could do it alone. Some things they could do alone, but a lot of things they had to do as a community. And we need to learn more of that so we can actually bring community back, whether it's the United States or any country out here. We need to stop being so divided and start working together. Again, being our individual selves, but being able to understand that we are not alone in this. Okay, so there are a lot more things that you're going to go through, and also vocabulary words. We don't have time to go through them, but there's a great deal of vocabulary words in here, mainly because you haven't heard them before, and they're needed. But there's easy ones like masks and carvings, but it gives you a little bit more understanding of the northern coast culture as well. And then really fun, the activities at the end. In here we actually have, this time, 4 of them. Everything from storytelling to the Salmon Life science project. So that's really fun. Ceremonial role play. And also the first one is more, because if you like crafts, creating your own totem pole. So we're actually going to send you a block of wood that you can make your own totem pole. Oh shoot, we didn't do it for this one. Maybe if we talk about it the next time, we'll send you that. It's a little bit harder. It's more for older kids because you're going to use knives. But it's so much fun. So if your parents will allow you, see if you can find a block of wood, a soft wood, almost like those that they use in the Pinewood Derby cars, and see if you can carve out a totem pole. Otherwise, use the clay that we gave you and build it with clay. See what you can design. Maybe make individual totems. Those are also really fun. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this Adventure Box podcast, and we will talk to you next time. Take care. Tomorrow it's going to be the cultures down south. We're going to actually have to lump them together some because we have a lot of them and we don't have much time. So thanks again. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow actually. Take care. Bye.